an existential psychological thriller involving an endless road. Pretty good.
K-Dog's movie review.
It Ends. It's directed by Alex Ulam and stars Mitchell Cole, Akira Jackson, Noah Toth, and Phineas Yoon. Friends on a late-night food run become trapped on an infinite highway with otherworldly terrors lurking beyond. Confined in their Jeep Cherokee, they must decide whether to accept their fate or attempt escape. Okay, so I just got back from seeing It Ends. This movie actually came out a year ago in 2025. I think it did like a few festival runs or something, and it recently got picked up by Neon. So now we're seeing a theater release. And at least in the theater that I went to, this was labeled as a horror film. To put it more accurately, I would describe this like I did in the intro, more of a psychological, existential thriller with a few horror elements in it. Now, I will be getting into spoilers during this review. I'm going to start spoiler free, but there will be a rather large spoiler section because there's a lot about this movie that I'd like to talk about. But don't worry, as always, I'll warn you before that happens. So basically, as I said in the intro, this movie is about a group of friends who are on this endless road. They just keep driving and driving, and it never seems to end without any form of escape. A simple premise like this is something that I can get behind. And from the beginning, you're sort of trying to figure out what's happening. I will say there are going to be people who aren't going to like this movie. It's partly because it's labeled as a horror. I didn't find it necessarily scary, although, a lot of the themes and a lot of the implications in this movie are legit terrifying, but it's not really in your face scary. It's not, Conjuring Part 7, a nun screaming in your face scary. It's more of that existential dread. A movie that can be slow, and without spoiling too much, that's kind of the point. A movie that you can interpret in a lot of different ways. Having said that, though, I really did enjoy this one. I thought the acting was really well done from our four leads. In the beginning, it took a little adjusting to, because in the beginning, it sort of felt like they were characterizing a group of friends, almost like hamming up, like, hey, dude, like, we're all buddies, man, right? Ha ha ha, you're such a douche. Like that kind of talk. And it felt a little unnatural at first, but once the movie got going a little more and they got into the rhythm of interacting with each other in more of a, what I thought, realistic way, it settled and became a lot better. And as I said, this movie isn't exactly a horror, but I will say the more typical horror elements in it, especially towards the beginning of the movie, were pretty effective. They worked really well for me. I was on the edge of my seat towards the beginning when these characters get onto this road and they start to puzzle and understand what's really happening. Those scenes were really tense and really effective. I'd honestly like to see this filmmaker go full horror route because it's there. The creative horror juices are there. But anyway, after a lot of that tension settles and the characters really start to dive into the situation that they're in and discover what's going on, the movie really becomes something different. It's more of a slow burn, taking a little bit more time with our characters as they embark on this seemingly endless journey. And it's good that the actors are great in this because this is a really claustrophobic film. I mean, we really only have two locations, the inside of the car and the outside of the car. We're spending a lot of time in the inside of the car with our four leads. Relatively fine looking movie. There weren't any shots that were particularly wowing me in any way, but that's not really the point here. The point is to just be on this journey with our characters and discover what's going on. I will say the sound design was a little off for me. It started out super loud and they really upped the volume of the car itself. The blinker noise or the engine noise, the wheels, but that kind of overpowered our character's dialogue. It was hard to hear at some points. It is effective during certain parts of the movie where scary things are happening, but I'm gonna chalk all that up to it being low budget. I'd also say that the pacing for this movie is pretty good. It sits at about an hour and a half. And as I said, we really only have two locations here. It never felt like it dragged too much. So, overall, before I get into spoilers, I would recommend this movie. It's not that long, it's only about an hour and a half. It's a very simple but effective premise. It has good acting. It's one of those movies that you want to talk about with people after you've watched it, get their interpretation on what happened. I will say, if you're looking into something more popcorn horror or something more, typically scary, this is not it. This is more of a slow, artsy, metaphorical, existential, psychological thriller. So, yeah, go out and see it. Or don't. I don't care. Okay, spoiler section, you've been warned. As I said before, I didn't want to give away too much without spoiling, and I really want to dive into my interpretation of this movie. And I think the best way of doing that is to just sort of quickly go through the whole movie. So basically, the story begins with three of our characters helping the fourth move into their new apartment. They've all recently graduated college, with I think the exception of one. One of them maybe didn't go to college. He talked about being in the military, I think, or something like that. The character that's moving into a new apartment recently got a new job. They move in the friend and then they get in the car ready to go get some food or something. And that's where they turn upon this road that seemingly never ends. And right off the bat, one of the things I liked about this movie is they quickly realize that something's wrong. They quickly realize that this road doesn't go anywhere. They drive for, I think it's like the first 6 hours or 24 hours or something, and they realize their tank of gas has not gone down. They're still at a quarter tank, and they're not tired. They're not hungry. They're not thirsty. They can't even sleep, even though they kind of want to escape for a bit and just close their eyes. And they quickly dive into the conversations about what's happening, trying to figure out what's going on. Are we dead? Is this purgatory? Is this some weird wormhole? Are they caught in a loop? And as I said before, this movie does definitely have horror elements early on. The first time that they stop the car, they are attacked, I say in quotes, by these groups of people that really want to get into the car, that are screaming for help, that desperately want the car and to get in the car. They quickly drive away though. But the setup for that, the setup for them, getting out of the car, looking around, and then someone noticing something in the distance, and then just out of nowhere, all these people rushing to the car was pretty scary and I thought anxiety inducing. Those beginning stages of, oh my God, what's happening? What's going on? Who are these people? We can't stop driving. That was all really intense and effective for me. But once they realize that something's wrong, they can't stop, they start to get used to it a bit. And really the movie slows down at this point. It slows down, not in a bad way necessarily, but it slows down into more of, like I said, a psychological thriller. These characters are trying to figure out and just have a conversation about what's happening. Now, here's my interpretation of it. I think the road and the journey itself is an allegory for life and discovering what life is. We have these four characters who recently graduated college and they're about to enter the workforce and really learn what life entails. Up until this point, they're kind of like many other people forced into the education system. You're forced from a young age to do X, Y, and Z. And then you get to this point where you finish high school or you graduate college and you're on your own. You're open to have these choices about where your life goes. And it's sort of that discovery of what life is. Now, I'll start with Tyler. He's the Southern character, the one who's driving in the beginning of the movie. I think it's his car. He is kind of distanced from a lot of the early conversation that involves, more lighthearted, jokey discussions about who would you rather be hunted by or assist you in hunting? You know, he's kind of brushing it off like, oh, guys, are we really still having these types of conversations? We're adults now. Later on, they're talking about relationships, and he says that unfortunately he broke up with his girlfriend. And they're all like, why? And it's because he didn't want to drive 3 hours with his girlfriend to a pumpkin patch and go on a date with her there. The three friends are like, well, what? You're so weird. Like that's crazy. And then 5 minutes later, Tyler talks about being the kind of guy who wants to settle down, which is incredibly contradictory to what he was just saying a few minutes before. He wants to achieve that end game, achieve that nirvana of life, being settled down, which driving 3 hours with your girlfriend or wife to a pumpkin patch is like, that is settled down in my mind, at least. You know, you can't settle down with someone without going on those types of dates with them. And we see this later in the movie. He's the first one to leave the car and just run off into the woods. He basically tells James, I can't do this anymore, man. I can't be in this car with these people anymore. I can't be just sitting here. I want to figure this out. I want to get to the next thing. And so if we connect the road to life discovery and the journey itself, he doesn't have the patience to enjoy the moment or revel in the journey itself. He just wants the end game. He just wants to be there already. He just wants to figure it out and do it. He doesn't want to sit in the car with his friends and talk, play games, or listen to music or anything like that. He just wants to be settled. He wants to be done with it. And so he leaves early. And then we have Day and Fisher, two characters that seemingly more so live in the moment. They are just enjoying the ride. Now, it's not to say that they enjoy the entire ride. I mean, it's more so they accept it for what it is. After so many thousands of miles, they've developed routines. They have timed out events for their day. They'll listen to a specific song. They'll get out of the car and just scream out their emotions. They'll have, you know, sort of talk time or alone time. They'll decorate the car in different ways with the items that they do have. They learn to live with the situation that they're in. They're driving on forever, and yet they're still living. And this connects to earlier on in their discussions when they're talking about careers and such. They're kind of just in the moment. They're like, well, I got to get on this website and start applying for jobs. And in the discussions with, would you rather hunt gorillas or whatever, they're just kind of having fun with it. They're laughing about it. They're coming up with their own different theories and stuff and, you know, playing on the meme itself. They tell James after like 800,000 miles or so, hey man, we're just going to get out. We can't do this anymore. Just join us. Join us when we scream every day. You should join us when we listen to music. You should join us when we dance. You should join us when we create memes. Just enjoy the ride that we're on and enjoy the experience. And they ultimately decide to just live life outside of this journey in this car. Meanwhile, James is the kind of character who is trying to be more logical and figure things out. He does this in the absence of enjoying the ride. In the beginning of the movie, he's the one that's moving into a new apartment. He has a new job, but he doesn't really seem happy about it. He talks at one point about starting this job and, you know, quickly making 6 figures in a few years and getting a wife and having children, but he just seems so depressed about it. Similar to Tyler, he's trying to obtain all of the things in life that you're supposed to obtain, but not really caring about them or enjoying the moment, because he sounds just pretty sad while talking about it. He just seems like the type of person who's trying to do what society thinks is right and be logical about the next steps to take. He applies that throughout the entire drive. His goal is to figure out what this is and how to beat it or discover what it truly means. And so he doesn't participate in any of the lighthearted things that Day and Fisher do. He's just hell-bent on sitting there and figuring it out, which ultimately leads him to driving by himself after Day and Fisher give up. he keeps going. He starts questioning more things, like it randomly rains one day and he's like, what does this mean? Is it because I made this decision that it's now raining? He ultimately gets to a pretty funny sign. I mean, this movie does have a lot of humor in it, dark humor even. The sign says the road ends or something. Road ends or it ends or whatever, showing that the road is ended. There's nothing but woods beyond it. There are a bunch of cars parked there. Seemingly other people made it to the end and they just got out. Now, James at this point is very distraught. He just screams like, what the fuck? And sits there on the ground. Again, they don't need to sleep or eat or anything. So he just sits there for a couple days on the ground, contemplating what's going on. Again, I think this is really connected to life. I think this is a metaphor for life. Life doesn't necessarily have a purpose. None of us choose to enter life on this planet. We're just born and we experience it. And then after going and going and living, it just sort of ends. Humans have been asking since the dawn of time, what's the point of it all? What's the point of life? What's the meaning? And what this movie is trying to say is that there isn't necessarily one. It could just be meaningless, without purpose. But that doesn't mean we don't have to enjoy the ride, which is what Day and Fisher learn to eventually do and accept and become at peace with. And we see this when James finally decides to sit down next to the car and eat a Cliff Bar. They've had this bar since the very beginning, but James kept telling them not to eat it because he wasn't sure how it would digest. He wasn't sure if they were supposed to do that. So he always told them not to eat it because they didn't need to. They were never hungry. But he finally decides to eat it and starts crying, saying that it's so good. Now, it's kind of played for comedy at the same time because he's just crying, saying this bar is so good. But in and itself means that he was finally able to just enjoy something for the sake of enjoying it. It just tasted good. And so he felt good because of it. It didn't necessarily mean anything. It didn't seemingly in that moment affect him physically in any way. It didn't reveal something about the way the world works. It didn't snap him out of the road ending or anything like that, or the place he was in. It was just a really tasty bar. And so after that, James says something under his breath like, all right, I'll come back. And he decides to start driving the other way, seemingly back towards his friends. And along the way, he picks someone up from the woods. And he, with this guy, starts the same conversation that they were having at the beginning of the movie. This meme conversation about, would you rather be hunted by a guy with a gun or rats or apes or whatever? And he accepts the guy's answer and is just seemingly into the conversation and enjoying it for what it is. Versus the beginning of the movie, he was kind of trying to win the argument by logicking it. He was just being overly aggressive about having the right answer. So much so to the point where some characters were like, dude, calm down. Like, it's just a joke question. And so again, his arc was to stop trying to win at life. Stop trying to beat it. Stop trying to understand it and just enjoy it for what it is. Because ultimately pisses him off at first, and what pisses off so many other people or leaves them with such existential dread is that there is no purpose. It doesn't really mean anything. Now, as for the people in the woods, I think they sort of represent a lot of us in this life that just want to get ahead and desperately want help to succeed in life and move forward. That anxiety and that dread of having to do it on your own, that scared feeling of just wanting help. And then you have others in the woods, seemingly those who have driven for quite some time and abandoned their cars, those like Day and Fisher, people who are just content laying in the grass, this constant need to propel forward and logic life. It's not worth it. That was a lot of talking, but ultimately that was my interpretation of the movie. I like this one. I think it was fun to sit here and try to unravel what it all meant. I think movies in a lot of ways can be like art. Two people look at the same piece of media and have different interpretations. So tell me yours. Do you think I'm way off? Do you think it's something completely different? Do you think it's something a little more specific than life itself? Is it like capitalism or going to school or, being in the career or something? I don't know. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. Till next time.